Hi there, Doc from Barcast Audio here today to talk about an important topic, the strategy for your final days of bar prep. What you should be prioritizing, what you should be thinking about as you enter the final days of bar exam prep. How can you make the most of your final days, and what you should do and should not do ahead of the exam. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to this channel for more of these videos. Be sure to check us out at barcastaudio.com. We have audio outlines, essay attack sheets. Everything I know about the bar exam has been condensed into these really great audio outlines with audio flashcards, all the stuff that's going to help you get over the finish line, whether you're taking the bar exam now, taking another bar exam. We have it there at barcastaudio.com. Now, without further ado, let's talk about how you should be spending your final days of bar prep. Some do's, some don'ts. And our number one do or don't here is really just don't try to overdo it with practice questions ahead of the final week of bar prep. I know exam day is just around the corner and you feel like you don't have enough time to quite see all the practice questions available to you with whatever testing bank you may be using, UWorld, Adaptivar, whatever you're using. There seem to be endless questions out there for you to take. And you feel that you need to do those endless questions because you've already seen that practice questions really help you improve. But this is a game of diminishing returns as we get closer to the exam. So you should not be burning yourself out on practice questions as we get closer to exam day. You should start to wind that process down. Think about it this way. If you were going to run a marathon, you wouldn't run a marathon twice within 1 week. Maybe you would. Maybe some ultra marathon runners are thinking, of course I would do that. But most people would not do that. So don't do that with bar prep. Do not try to exhaust yourself by taking constant, real practice questions ahead of the final week of bar prep. You've done a lot of work to this point, hopefully, and you should be set up with your baseline, with the original sort of plan that you've set forth for yourself. So, wind down practice questions and instead start looking at cold recall and sort of study methods that might allow you to remain active, remain mentally in tune without falling apart and without showing up on exam day completely burnt out. And what do I mean? With that, I come with our second do here, and that is start doing cold recall drills. Whether that is actually doing flashcards, or my favorite recommendation is in the final week of bar prep, go to maybe a library or just take a sheet of paper. Think about and run through different topics that are going to come up on the bar. So for example, let's say contracts, the parole evidence rule. Think about that concept, and I want you to write out the rules as you know them, cold recall, as if you were explaining it to a small child or someone who has no idea what law school is all about. This is going to be a good process for you. Go through all the main subjects, all the main topics that are commonly tested on the bar exam, and you'll see that maybe your knowledge in certain areas isn't quite what it needs to be. Maybe you're messing up one element of a 4-part rule, and you'll start to fill in those gaps as you get closer to exam day. What I don't want you to do here is get too down on yourself if you can't really cold recall stuff the way you want to ahead of the exam. Don't panic. This is completely common. You're starting to forget things that you studied 3 weeks ago. It all seems to be leaking out of you at this point. But do your best to use this process as simply a reminder, a refresher, or an opportunity to fill in the gaps of your knowledge and maybe you may be forgetting as we get closer to the exam. So teach different subjects to yourself, cold recall them on a sheet of paper, on a whiteboard, whatever you may do. Teach them to someone, maybe helpful to teach them to your spouse. Talk about them at dinner. You probably won't have a spouse maybe at the other side of the exam if you do that every night, but do your best. Do your best to make the most of this final time. Finally, my third tip here is really going to be start worrying about the logistics of exam day. And what do I mean by logistics? You've probably booked a hotel if that's something that the exam requires of you, but you need to start thinking about, if you didn't book a hotel, what you're going to be doing for exam day. How are you getting to the exam? What time are you planning on leaving your hotel? What are you planning on eating for breakfast? What are you planning on drinking? Are you going to want to make sure you don't have coffee beforehand because it makes you use the bathroom and you want to maximize your time and you can't waste that time? These are the things I want you to start thinking about. And you don't have to necessarily panic about them. I don't want you to go crazy about this, but you really should start putting some time into logistics. Stuff like, how am I getting to the exam? What am I eating in the 24 hours before the exam? And also, what am I going to wear for the exam? Sometimes people wear some wild, inappropriate outfits. Try your best not to do that because you're seeing people who you may see in a professional environment at some point. Try your best to account for whether the room you're going to take the exam in may be too hot or too cold. So you have a couple options there in terms of clothing. You can take off a sweatshirt. You can, I know certain states have rules about what you can wear in terms of having to wear more professional attire. I'm looking at you, Virginia. But do your best in those moments to really just think about the logistics of the day. Think about everything that could go wrong and try to eliminate points of friction. I don't want you to go nuts thinking about this, but it is important for you to consider things. There was famously a story that I worked with a student who was planning on taking the train up from another city the day before the exam. Ultimately, the trains were all canceled. They had to catch an Uber overnight. 3 hours, hundreds of dollars later, they got to the exam with like an hour to spare with no sleep, trying to sleep in the car of an Uber overnight, and it was just a disaster. So don't be like that, student. Do your best to worry about the logistics and set yourself up for success early on, and you'll find that ultimately things will work out. Finally, in terms of the final day before the exam, I really recommend that you stop studying at that time. Maybe go over a couple outlines and some real problem areas, but I don't want you going crazy in the 24 hours before the bar exam. Start to really wind down. I mentioned it a week out. It's more important a day out. Do not go nuts in that final 24 hours. You've done a lot of work. Trust in the process. And I've said that 1,000 times. I mean it again here. Trust in the process and don't go crazy. And try to watch a show that will relax you. Try to settle your nerves. Try to make sure you're in a good mindset entering the bar exam. You've done the work. You've done everything you need to get to this point, and you will pass the exam as long as you keep your head about you entering exam day. That does it for us in this short video. I just wanted to give you some key tips in terms of preparing for the final week of bar prep. Be sure to check us out at barcastaudio.com. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more of these videos. Until later, I will talk to you guys soon. Bye now.